All right, NPR calls him a one-man science religion reconciliation committee, and I can say that's true. I know Matthew because he started showing up to our credo formation events. I do these things on Thursday nights where we dive into some theological thing or another, and he always had the best questions because he was an interloper. He was a Protestant and coming with all kinds of critically minded, biblically informed questions about what it was we were doing. And then last year, he asked if we could receive him into the church. And I tried to talk him out of it, but I hope that you found this to be a happy home. He graduated with a double major in physics and religious studies from the College of William and Mary, and then went on to get a Master of Divinity from Vandy Divinity here in Nashville. He currently teaches robotics at Harpeth Hall, and I think you're talking to us a little bit about how to get our Christ the King School's robotics program up and running. He's been educating communities of faith about science and scientists about faith for a number of years in a lot of different kinds of scenarios. This is the first time we've had you here, I think. So it's about time. So I think that's enough. I'll turn it over to Matthew Grove. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. I am going to start us off with reading a prayer from Laudato Si. That's in the back of the book. So join me in prayer. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain, at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, and to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey toward your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Amen. Amen. I'm very excited to be here today. John gets a partial credit for my conversion to the Catholic faith, but this book also receives partial credit for my conversion to the Catholic faith. I have a kind of a wide-ranging background in climate world. I worked for a Christian climate organization for a couple years after college. I've worked with kind of button-up moderate environmental groups like the Sierra Club. I've worked with kind of young people, let's burn it all down climate groups like the Sunrise Movement and the Green New Deal people. And nowhere across all of climate world have I found something that has the moral vision, the moral weight, the moral imagination of Laudato Si. And so I was given a copy of Laudato Si when I was partway through college, and I thought, this is it. This is beautiful. This is true. I don't know what people made this, but I'm interested in them. And so here we are. So if you have not read this and you are from Catholic world, I really encourage you. I'm glad you're here, and we're going to read a good amount of it in the next couple of weeks. But I would encourage you to do so because I think it really is. If my secular friends ask me, oh, what should I read about climate change? I say, you should read Laudato Si, even if they're not in Christian world, because I think this is the best thing anyone's ever written about climate change and this current moment in history. And I think for a historical comparison's sake, like if you talk about civil rights, I think the moral vision and imagination of the Black church in America made civil rights happen in a way. And I think the Catholic Church is uniquely positioned to have Laudato Si make climate action happen in a way by virtue of its position to the global south and to the global west. And so I think something like this is desperately what the world needs in this present moment. So I'm glad that we, as a Catholic Church, made it, and I'm glad that you're here to learn a little bit more about it as well. Has anybody read this? Everyone has read this? Not everyone has read this. Okay, half and half. That's great. Because if you haven't come across encyclicals before, an encyclical is just a letter from the Pope to the bishops. That's kind of an open letter, so anyone can read it. You can find it for free on the Vatican website, or you can get fairly cheap copies like this one somewhere. And encyclicals are written all the time. Francis has written 2 or 3 by now. Most popes write a couple. And they're topical about theology sometimes, about evangelizing and love and family, or they're about social issues. So this one obviously is about climate and ecology. Francis's more new one is a little more about social relationships. But then there have been ones in the past about unions and industrialization and reproduction and birth control. So encyclicals are not intended to be a massive textbook. They're intended to be something that people do have a chance to open up and read for themselves if they want to. And as you can see, it's only 100 pages or so, split up into a bunch of little paragraphs. So it is intended to be accessible to lay people, in contrast with a lot of theology. So I really appreciate that about this in particular. A few more nuts and bolts about this one. Francis in particular addresses it to the entire world. And so they're usually addressed to the bishops, and sometimes people can read them, but Francis has gone out of his way to specifically address this to the entire world, to every living creature, I think is the phrase he uses. So it's intended to be read by lay people and not just by the bishops, which I appreciate. And the nutshell version of this is that living our vocation to be protectors of God's handiwork and to hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor is essential to a life of virtue. It is not an optional or a secondary aspect of our Christian experience. It is not an optional or a secondary aspect of our Christian experience. So in Francis's mind, this is the challenge that we must meet in this moment. This isn't a club. This isn't a hobby. This isn't an elective. This is the challenge for the church to meet in today's day and age. And that's why he chose to shape his papacy around this topic by his first encyclical. So it tells you his priority list, that the first encyclical he wrote, this is what it's about, which I really appreciate. And then at the back list, so that's the opening bit. And at the back, I think you can also learn a lot about Francis's vision for this by who he cites. And so encyclicals, like every other church document, are based upon lots of church teaching from the past. And so all encyclicals cite previous encyclicals. So this one cites a lot of JP2 and Benedict. But uniquely, it also cites a lot of bishops' conferences. And so the American Bishops' Conference gets cited a few times, but most of them are from the Global South. He cites the African Bishops' Conference a lot, the Central American and South American Bishops' Conferences a lot, the Philippines a lot. And so it's a little unusual for an encyclical to be pulling from the bishops, and it's even more unusual for an encyclical to be pulling from the Global South. So that's Francis's vision, is for this to be a global document for a global church. And he really cares about relationships. So one of the main takeaways is that we need to restore a right relationship with each other and with nature and with the rest of the global church. So I think him citing from the global church is a good emphasis on that as well for us. So in that vein, for us with relationships, we are going to start off with doing kind of a relationship activity. So in the first thing on your page here is Laudato Si number 84, which I'm going to read aloud, and then I'll ask you all to read it again at your small group. The entire material universe speaks of God's love, his boundless affection for us. Soil, water, mountains, everything is, as it were, a caress of God. The history of our friendship with God is always linked to particular places, which take on an intensely personal meaning. We all remember places, and revisiting those memories does us much good. Anyone who has grown up in the hills, or used to sit by the spring to drink, or played outdoors in the neighborhood square, going back to these places is a chance to recover something of their true selves. So in the vein of emphasizing relationships, I am going to ask you to pick someone at your table, hopefully someone who you don't know extremely well, and if that can't work out, that's okay too. But pick someone at your table and talk to them about a place in nature that was wonderful for you as a child. So thinking about your relationship with nature, think of a place that was wonderful for you as a child, and really tell the person why. Like, do your best to reflect on what it was about that place. When we're children, we're full of wonder and awe and mystery at how beautiful the world is. And we need to recapture some of that as adults. So take a moment and try to really think about what it was about this place. Try to remember why you felt that way as a kid. And we'll take probably a minute or two for each of you to share with a partner. And go. Let's come back together, and if I can get a volunteer to give me an anecdote or tidbit from your partner's story that stuck with you, that you appreciated.
Say that again, I was talking to Mike.
Can I have a volunteer to give me an anecdote or tidbit from your partner's story that stuck with you or that you appreciated? Yes, ma'am.
My partner Beth here liked to go to Buffalo Mountain in East Tennessee, and she went with a camping group, and they would identify flowers and rocks and the flora and fauna, and she likes moss on trees, and so I could relate to that.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Bob O'Gorman is my partner, and he had lived near the railroad tracks, and he liked going to the railroad tracks and picking up the stuff that came off the trains, which he said maybe wasn't so ecological. But what impressed me was that he was fascinated with where were these trains going.
Yeah. Stuff that fell off the trains, you mean parts of the trains or their contents?
Coal.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My partner was Mike, and Mike lived near the forest, and he liked to go and wander through the forest to get away from a noisy house where there were 8 children that his mother was raising. And he welcomed the solitude of the forest that the forest would give him.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Yeah.
My partner was Jim Bryan, and he described visiting as a kid a place in Northern California where the Russian River met the Pacific. And he was able to describe better than I will be just how mesmerizing it was to see these two bodies of water interacting, the flow outward and then the flow back in. And we spent hours and hours watching it and experiencing it.
Anybody else? Anybody over here? Yeah.
Okay. Megan was my partner. Her dad's side of her family grew up on a farm in New York, and so she said she remembered fondly being there as a kid and being able to, pick from the produce and ride around on the 4-wheelers. And she said her dad built a little bridge over a stream, and so it was just sort of like an open playscape to enjoy.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think when we're kids, we can see truths about the world that's easier, and somehow we lose that as we get older. Neil deGrasse Tyson says that children make the best scientists because they're curious about everything. And if you've ever walked somewhere with a toddler, you know it's true, because they stop and they pick up a rock and they look at it, and then they pick up the next rock and look at it, and then they lick it, and then they're so curious about everything. And that fundamental curiosity is what makes someone into a good scientist, but it's also should be our default posture towards nature in general, I think, as people who are concerned with the God who made everything around us. I think that children have a ready ability to see the mystery and the beauty in the world around us. So I always really like doing this activity. How many people said something relating to water? About a half, yeah. I feel like water in some way, because it's so powerful maybe, it kind of contributes to our sense of humility and smallness in the world, but not in like a bad way, in a good way, which I really appreciate. Okay, so in the interest of continuing in our vision on relationships, I have picked another paragraph for us that we're going to sit and chat about. I thought about just lecturing to us the whole time, but it's about relationships, so that'd be kind of funny. So instead, I'm going to hopefully provoke some good conversations amongst you all and I'm going to circulate, and you're not being graded. I'm just curious to hear what you think. I am a teacher, but you're not being graded, so don't worry. And so Laudato Si number 83 is a good kind of summary paragraph for what Francis's vision is. And the way Francis shapes it is the three kind of acts of Laudato Si is seeing, judging, and acting. So this week we're focusing on seeing. Next week we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive on judging. And the third week is going to be acting, in which hopefully I will recruit a few of you to join a new creation care team I'm founding, just like St. Henry's has, that lets us interact more thoughtfully with other groups who are doing similar things in Tennessee and more broadly. So we'll stay tuned for that for week 3. But for the moment, we're focusing on seeing, and specifically seeing our relationship with the world around us. So I'm going to read, actually, can I have a volunteer who hasn't read yet, someone besides me, to read number 83 here? Thank you, ma'am.
The ultimate destiny of the universe is in the fullness of God. Here we can add yet another argument for rejecting every tyrannical and irresponsible domination of human beings over all other creatures. The ultimate purpose of other creatures is not to be found in us. Rather, all creatures are moving forward with us and through us towards a common point of arrival, which is God, in that transcendent fullness where the risen Christ embraces and illumines all things. Human beings endowed with intelligence and love are drawn by the fullness of Christ, are called to lead all creatures back to their Creator.
Thank you. So Francis really believes that the way we see other things is crucially important for how we live together in this world. And we often see things only how they relate to us, but we ought to see them in their own right, in their own purpose, in their own vision, in their own function, instead of just how can this thing help me or serve me or protect me, or how can I monetize it or whatever, right? So we have a couple of prompts here, and I hope we can take a good 10 or 15 minutes here. I encourage you to, someone at your table, read 83 aloud for the group, and then read it quietly to yourself and take a couple minutes. And then we'll hopefully have a good 5 or 10 minute discussion after that. So, thank you. All right, somebody from some table, tell me what a thought your table had was about how we can lead human creatures back to their creator. A volunteer from a table, tell me a thought your table had about how we can help lead human creatures back to their creator. Maybe the most hopeful. We'll find out. In my mind, it was one of the more straightforward of the 4, because we had a lot of wide-ranging conversations about dogs in heaven and all sorts of things.
Well, when you have a good experience out in nature and that kind of thing, tell other people about it and what you got out of it and those kinds of things, because somebody somewhere will go try to do that or add to it, or it will expand from there. And we have to get a wider respect and understanding based on where you've been and where I've been differently.
I like that. Somebody else?
Tell your story about the worms.
Yeah, I think the worm story.
The worm story is great.
Tell about the worm story. Okay, so I had 2 trees about this tall that needed to be planted really, really badly. So I called my grandson Drew up, who's home from college. I said, Drew, I have a job for you, and I've got to get these trees planted. He said, okay, Nana. So he came over. He said, well, first, do you have a shovel, Nana? I said, yes, I have a shovel. Okay. So he came over and started digging in where I wanted the trees planted. And as he was digging, we came across earthworms. I said, wait a minute, Drew. Let me pick up this worm. I'm going to put him in the dirt, and we'll put him back when we get ready to plant the trees. So every time, and he got a what do you call those pitch things? Pitchforks, whatever it is. And so it unearthed more worms, okay, Drew, let's stop. He said, no, what are you doing? I said, we're saving the earthworms. They have a purpose here. So he laughed about it. He said, oh, no, there's another worm. Get it. And so we put all the worms back in the dirt that they came out of. So I think that's what you do. Show them respect.
I think those worms feel more led back to their creator by us not killing them. I approve. If you shall know them by their fruit, and our fruit is killing them, then that's not a good look for humanity. I like that. Thank you. One more thought from a different group about leading creatures back to their creator.
I think we have to think about both meeting their immediate physical needs, but then also in education we talk a lot about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So like in order for students to learn, they need to feel safe, they need to be fed, they need to not be too cold or too hot. But the ultimate ideal, like the top of the pyramid, is self-actualization, like actually getting to the point where you feel like you have a purpose and you can fulfill it. And I think we get so stuck in just meeting people's immediate physical needs because we can't even do that well and steward our resources while there. But we really are supposed to get to self-actualization. Everybody should feel like they're worthy of having a purpose and that they can fulfill it.
Absolutely. We are coming up on time. The last thing I wanted to say about this is that the sentence that stood out to me that I really appreciated and why I picked this one is the ultimate purpose of other creatures is not to be found in us. I feel like it's very easy to look at the world through a me lens. Well, how does that affect me? And see everything through the lens of how does it affect my life. And my favorite passage of Scripture is towards the end of Job, where Job has all these questions and challenges to God, and then God takes him, he doesn't quite answer his question, but takes him on this tour of all the cosmos. Look at all these wonderful things I've made. You didn't make that. You don't understand this. And there's one throwaway line where God says, I make it rain on the cities and in the desert. And the purpose of that statement is that, Job, it's not all about you. I make it rain where there's people, and that's great, and you should praise me for that. But I also make it rain where there's not people. And it does no good to any humans whatsoever. The purpose there being that it's not all about you. And we as people, we're so quick to think it's all about us, and that everything is how we see the world. And we forget that things have value in their own right. So we have a larger passage on the back that I'm going to squeeze in the last 30 seconds. We have a larger passage on the back about extinction that I would encourage you to read if you're curious. Next week, we're going to come back and talk about throwaway culture, which is how Francis defines the way we interact with things that are inconvenient for us for any number of reasons. And then week 3, we're going to come back and talk about hopefully a project that we want to tackle here at Christ the King, and a more of an application side of things. But before that, you have homework. Your homework is to look at a thing in the world. Ideally, it's something on your daily commute that you your eyes glaze over when you drive past it. Look at a living thing and really take a good look at it. This morning, every one of you were able to talk for a minute or two about some beautiful place in nature that you experienced as a child. And all of us see so many living things all day, every day, that we don't look at. So your homework is to really zone in on something. Maybe it's a tree at a stoplight while you're waiting for the light to change. And ponder that tree. Like, how long has it been here? How far down do its roots go? What type of tree is it? Does it make fruit? I don't know. Are there male trees and female trees for this type? I'm not sure. So take a minute and really ponder something that's a living creature in your daily routine. And we'll check in next week about this living creature that you have pondered. And thank you all very much, and I will see you next week.
Thank you.